I've mentioned in a few of our videos already so far that Chattanooga has a super rich historical background, but some of the facts or the things that have happened in history are a little bit weirder and more interesting than others. Today, I'm going to cover 5 of the stranger things that have happened in Chattanooga history that I think you're really going to find interesting. So fact number 1 is that at one point in time, Chattanooga actually almost left Tennessee. So picture this: in the 1950s, Chattanooga city leaders are so angry at the Tennessee state government over taxes. They didn't feel like the state was fairly distributing tax revenue back to the city, so they came up with this crazy idea: hey, what if we just left Tennessee and went to Georgia instead? Obviously, that plan didn't end up working out. They are still here as part of Tennessee, but can you imagine how different that would be if Chattanooga was actually part of Georgia? And it's not out of the question at all that they thought that that was a good idea, because it is just right here on the state line. It would theoretically be super easy to redistribute that and just cross right over. I think that that is really interesting, and I for one am glad that we stayed part of Tennessee, but apparently at one point they thought it would be a great idea to leave on over to the Peach State. Weird and interesting fact number 2 is the time zone history. So during a similar era in 1947, Chattanooga, Knoxville, Maryville, and a couple other cities decided that they no longer wanted to be part of the Central Time Zone and wanted to move to Eastern instead. I don't really know why they did this, but apparently they decided that that was a better idea and a better fit, so that's what they did. They all left Central Time Zone and moved over to Eastern. However, this is really confusing for a lot of the surrounding areas, because if you're not familiar, Chattanooga borders like this. Here's Chattanooga and here's the border of the Central Time Zone. So if you get too far over either into Alabama or too far over some of the mountains, you actually end up in Central Time Zone. So it's really confusing. Some of the area is Eastern and some of it is Central, and while Chattanooga as a whole officially is on Eastern Time Zone at this point, you need to be really careful when you're going anywhere in the general vicinity, because some of the counties that are considered part of the greater Chattanooga, for example, Marion County or Sequatchie County, those all operate in Central Time Zone. So it's a little bit weird, it's a little bit funky, and I guess they just like to keep you on your toes and keep things interesting so that you're guessing about which time zone you're gonna be in. But at one point in time, we all shared the same one. Weird and interesting fact number 3 is that the world's first Coca-Cola bottling plant was in Chattanooga. If you've watched some of my previous videos, you know that I touched on this in another episode of Fun Facts for Chattanooga, but this one is worth noting because the history is a little bit weird and it's super interesting how this came about. So if you're familiar with Coca-Cola at all, you know that it actually originated in Atlanta, Georgia. When it was first originated, they just sold the fountain drinks. Nobody actually sold them as individual beverages that you can buy today in cans and bottles. So 2 attorneys back in the late 1800s bought the rights to actually manufacture it in a bottling facility for $1. A whopping $1 that turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry, which I think is so cool and so interesting that Chattanooga plays such a huge part of that history. And that original bottling company, they have moved to the original location, but the bottling company is still here and operates today in Chattanooga, employs hundreds of people every year. Super cool, super interesting, and a little weird how it got started. Weird fact number 4 is that some of the old parts of Chattanooga are literally underground in hidden parts of the city now. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So back in the 1800s, Chattanooga had a major flooding problem. I've mentioned before that the Tennessee River runs right through the middle of downtown. So because of that, when it would rain really heavily, parts of downtown would literally get completely covered in the rain. The flooding would literally submerge streets and buildings downtown. Like, not just a little bit, actual floods. There were times where it washed away storefronts, homes, roads, everything. Major issue. So city officials had to make a big decision, and they decided instead of constantly rebuilding after every single flood, they figured, let's just raise the city. So that's what they did. They literally raised the ground level 10 to 15 feet in some areas. They built on top of the old areas and just raised the city. But here is what is really interesting. If you go below some of the Chattanooga's modern streets, you'll find actually forgotten storefronts, tunnels, passageways that used to be one of the main roads of the city. And some of the underground areas actually still have old shop signs, maybe some broken windows and remnants of buildings that were left behind when the city moved upward. There are even places where you can see old sidewalks, old hollow spaces underneath where people once walked. Imagine if you were walking downtown and not realizing that you were walking above what used to be old parts of the streets of Chattanooga. I think that that is so cool. Last but not least, a weird and interesting fact about Chattanooga is the moon pie was invented right here downtown. So legend has it that a coal miner one day walked into a bakery in 1917, asked for a snack as big as the moon, and here we go. That's how the moon pie was created. Today, it is still a Southern favorite, especially apparently prepared with an RC Cola. I'm gonna be super honest, I am not a fan of the local moon pie, but it is a huge fan favorite for so many people, and it's really cool that it was born right here in downtown Chattanooga, all because a coal miner asked for a snack as big as the moon. That wraps up our episode for today. Be sure and leave me a comment and let me know what you thought about these fun, weird, and interesting facts. And don't forget to let me know if there's something that you want me to cover in a future video. There is no shortage of fun, weird, and interesting history facts about Chattanooga, and I would love to cover them for you in a future video. My contact information is below. I love to hear from you anytime. Be sure to DM me, send me an email, call, text, whatever's convenient for you. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.